Step right up and welcome to another exciting episode of Movie MP, the vlog where we review films and analyze them for success tips and self help tips. As promised, tonight's review is going to be a deep dive analysis of the movie Heretic or Heretic, however you pronounce it, 2024. I'll give a full review of the film, some trivia, and then a deep dive analysis of the symbolism, theology, and philosophy of the film. It's written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. It stars Hugh Grant, Sophie Thatcher, and Chloe East. The general description of the film is 1 hour 50 minutes long, rated R, and carries a Rotten Tomatoes rating of 91%. It's currently only available in theaters, but it is available for pre-sale through Amazon and Fandango at home. The tagline of this film is question everything, and yes, this film will have you questioning everything. The film is a thought-provoking discussion about faith and humanity wrapped up as a psychological horror film. Truly, I thought the film was phenomenal from beginning to end. Spoiler alert, this is a full blow-by-blow review with lots of spoilers and a deep dive discussion into the symbolism, theology, and philosophy of the film. Heretic is a very tense psychological thriller. Hugh Grant plays Mr. Reed, a kindly, older, middle-aged gentleman that is met by two missionaries wishing to convert him to the Mormon religion. The plot unfolds as the missionaries, initially comforted by Mr. Reed's friendly demeanor, quickly realize they have made a huge mistake. Reed uses charm, laced with menace and gaslighting, to engage them in a twisted theological debate. One of the reasons I enjoyed this film so much is it is a very deep and poses some very interesting questions. If you're a devoted Christian, I would advise you to either avoid this film entirely or buckle up. Otherwise, if you like intellectual films that have you questioning everything, then Heretic is for you. The definition of heretic is a person believing or practicing religion's heresy. The film is crafted with eerie suspense, blended with religious debate, horror elements, which culminate in a narrative that is both terrifying and thought-provoking. I believe Hugh Grant is phenomenal in the film. He plays a great villain that you are going to learn to love to hate. I think that Grant's history of playing in rom-coms and generally the all-around good guy makes the role of him playing a villain so much better. And let me tell you, volumes could be written about this film, and I suspect every time you watch it, you'll pick up on something new. I know I did. If this film went any deeper, Leonardo DiCaprio would need to be involved. So without further ado, let's get into the plot. Right at the start, we're subjected to some subliminal symbolism. The title is written in English with a subscript of an odd script. In the investigation, I found out that this is a totally made-up language called Eldarian. It's an elven language used primarily in works of fantasy. As Pee Wee Herman would say, why? What's the significance? I don't know! We then meet Sisters Barnes, played by Sophie Thatcher, and Paxton, played by Chloe East, two young Mormon missionaries out to find people interested in converting to the religion. They're sitting on a bench having a discussion. The very first dialogue is Sister Paxton questioning if Trojan magnums are the same size of regular condoms. She goes on to question if this is fake, then what else do you believe because of marketing? If you grew up believing that the Book of Mormon was fake, you would probably think it was fake because that's what you've been told. Sister Barnes replies that she knows it's not fake and that magnums are huge because her sister told her that her ex was scary big and had to use magnum condoms. This foreshadows the entire plot of the film. As the cameras pull back, we get indoctrinated by more and more symbolism. The back of the bench that they're sitting on features a condom ad that questions who says size doesn't matter. There's also a sticker with the number 303 on it. The number 303 is significant in metaphysical circles. 303 is known as the angel number 303, and it symbolizes positive growth and transformation. There's also a cross with a dot in each of the 4 quadrants within a circle. We'll discuss that at the very end of today's review during my deep dive analysis. There's also a sticker I can't make out. Maybe it's a band sticker, but I'm sure there's some significance to that too. Paxton states that she has become a Mormon because of an amateur porn video that she watched where the woman felt shame. They have a list of prospects that they plan to visit to evangelize. As they make their way to these people's homes, they continue to have philosophical discussions. At one point, Sister Paxton is set up when a group of young girls ask to take her picture. But this is a ruse just to pull down her gown so they can see her quote-unquote magic underwear. They continue on their mission, but Paxton is clearly impacted by this. She brings up that the South Park musical even makes fun of them. They eventually find their way to one of their prospects' house, Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant. They lock their bikes to the front gate with a bike lock, and Barnes puts the key in her pocket. They then knock on the front door of the home. After some weird mechanical sounds, Mr. Reed opens the door and comes off as a friendly, late middle-aged man. They ask if he's still interested in the Mormon religion, and he says that he is. It begins to storm heavily, so he invites them in. They tell him that they cannot come in unless a female is present. He tells them that his wife is in the kitchen baking a pie, so come on in. Mr. Reed invites them into the living room and takes their coats, but soon, after the initial polite introductions, it starts to get real weird real quick. There are quite a few red flags. First, you hear some odd mechanical devices being activated behind the door before Reed can open it. This is relevant later in the film. Upon entering the home, Reed asks if it's okay that the walls and ceiling have metal in them. The house makes weird guttural echoing sounds through the film. It's also oddly sterile and looks like the last time the decor was updated was circa 1972. The windows are like little prison windows. There's a butterfly trying to get out one of the windows, and this is another foreshadowing of the film, of the plot of the film, and our first reference to butterflies. The lights are on some sort of weird electrical timer. Reed tells them that his wife is in the kitchen baking a blueberry pie, but then states she is too shy to come out. No pics of his wife is seen anywhere, only a pic of him and his dog, and there's an odd picture on the wall that says, "Bless this mess." Soon the conversion takes a sharp probing turn as he questions become more personal and ultimately begin to question their beliefs. I would argue that their desire to find and convert someone has blinded them to all these red flags. Some of the key dialogue here includes Reed stating that it's so important to find a faith in a doctrine you actually believe. Reed also mentioned that he has a personal struggle to find that one true religion for a very long time. Paxton states that when I die, I want to come back as a butterfly and follow around the people I love and land right on their hand of the people that she loves. This is the second reference to a butterfly. Reed states that he thinks it's strange that Barnes' dad has not tried to contact her from the other side following his death. Is this a hint by him that there is nothing on the other side? No heaven, no hell? Reed asks about polygamy, stating that it's a misogynist practice and modern revelation from 1890 has used to erase it or banish it. He questions if Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon religion, used it to legitimize his cheating on his wife when he slept with some 16-year-old girl. And next comes up that the axiom, with great power comes great responsibility. Paxton responds from Spider-Man, and Reed corrects her and tells her from Voltaire. This is the film's first example of iteration, and we're going to see this come up, just like iteration, again and again and again and again. Reed goes on and says, if revelation is filtered by man and we know man sins and lies, how do we know it's true? Paxton replies, faith is about how you feel. Reed replies, yes, it's our personal relation with God that matters. Reed asks them then about their favorite fast food restaurant. This is yet again another iteration. They talk about Burger King and Wendy's. Barnes says, we don't talk about Taco Bell. And then Reed makes this creeper statement that he's never had a Wendy, which I find kind of odd, and yet again, another foreshadowing of this man being a creep. Reed goes on that he studied theology, and after studying all the religions, he's discovered that the more you know, the less you know. This is true. This is a theory called novice to the expert cycle, whereas as you learn things, the more expert you become, the more you realize that you don't know what you don't know. Reed goes on to say, by the time I was 50, I was so malnourished by the fast food of religion, all claiming to be the one true religion, yet none seemed true under the microscope. And then I began to wonder what else is out there. Reed continues that the last thing I wanted to do was find the one true religion, but unfortunately I did. Becoming increasingly uncomfortable, the girls insist that they meet his wife. He replies that he will go ask her to come in and serve the pie. He blows out the candle on the coffee table and gets up to go get his wife. Barnes turns the candle around to discover that it is a blueberry pie candle. So the whole time they've just been smelling this candle and not some pie baking. Or that's at least what Reed wants them to think at this point. He heads down a hall of the home and disappears into the darkness. He returns a few moments later to tell them that his wife can't come out, but they are welcome to come back to meet her. He again disappears down the darkened corridor. The girls at this time feel it's best to exit stage left and to leave, but when they try to open the door, they find that it won't open. With no other alternative, they build up the courage to head down the same darkened corridor that Reed has. They reach another room that appears to be part study, part living room, and part church chapel. There's an altar in the middle of the room, and in fact, later Reed refers to this room as a fake church. They ask Mr. Reed to help them open the front door so they can leave. Paxton and Barnes lies to Reed. They pretend they took a phone call and tell him that they have to get back to the church because they need them. He replies that it's impossible because the front door is on a time lock and will not open until morning. He, however, tells them that they are welcome to leave at any time, but they must do so out the back of his house. He then gives them back their coats, and Paxton realizes that the key to their bike lock is now in her coat pocket and not in Barnes. The girls notice, however, that there are two different doors that lead out the back of the house. They question Mr. Reed about this, and he tells them that they must choose one of the doors. At some point in the evening, Reed has become fascinated or feels threatened by Barnes. This is the turning point that prevents him from allowing them to leave. As the girls become more and more obviously upset, Reed's questions grow more intense, challenging their faith and implying hidden, twisted philosophies on life, control, and religion. Reed's discussions shift to manipulation and psychological testing, forcing the sisters to question their beliefs and themselves. What starts as a theological debate becomes a sadistic game. Some of the key dialogue here include Paxton asking, "It's like a church in here, did you build it?" Reed states, "No, my wife built it." Reed then also goes on to say, "Do you still believe my wife is in the next room, despite all the evidence of the contrary, the scented candle, the absence of blueberry pie, or have you been politely dodging a lie? Something I want you to think about and to think about it in the context of your beliefs." Reed goes on to say, "Do you believe in God because someone told you at an impressionable age that God is real despite having doubts when getting older, despite evidence to the contrary. Your father losing control of his body, is it God's plan to ruin his life? Or did you go on believing that that wasn't true because you gave comfort because you were afraid of what it would all mean if it were a lie? He goes on to say that I put the scented candle on the table because I wanted you to think what you believe just because someone asked you to believe it. Reed states if they learn the truth, they may want to die. Reed gives his explanation and compares the three big Abrahamic religions to the landlord game and Monopoly. He compares Judaism, or as he says, the OG religion, to the landlord game. Monopoly to Christianity, Monopoly the ultimate banker edition game to Islam, and then Monopoly the Bob Ross edition, or the quirky regional spin-off game, he compares to Mormonism. He then goes on to give some statistics about Monopoly. He says that it's been translated into 47 different languages and it's sold in 140 countries. Over 1 billion people have played, but only a fraction of that billion have finished it. I believe this is a reference to most people not fully finishing or reading the Bible cover to cover. Paxton even comments to Reed that he reads more than they do when he shows them his Book of Mormon with a bunch of those little note tags through the book. The pawns he refers to avatars. I believe yet again this is another comparison to religion. He goes on to say that the landlord game was invented by Elizabeth Maggie to educate kids about taxation, and Monopoly was invented by Charles Darrow, but Reed pronounces it more like Darwin in the film, and I think this is intentional. Reed's argument that the iterations dilute the message and obscure the original. He argues that Judaism, although it's the original religion, is less popular because it doesn't advertise. It doesn't have missionaries. It doesn't have advertisers. It doesn't have salespeople. And it doesn't promise to provide a better life. He goes on to say that holy text or mythologies or iterations are not true or real in a literal sense, merely a conduit to a more existential truth. Reed argues that the mythology of a savior born of a virgin who could perform miracles and was supernaturally resurrected after death was a very popular belief 1,000 years before Christ. Then he goes on to name off a bunch of pagan gods. Mithras, a Roman god, he had 7 levels of initiation. Here we see the number 7, which is the first I think we see the number in the film, but it does come up again. He performed miracles and used the symbolism of the cross. Horus, the Egyptian god, walked on water. He was crucified, and he had disciples. Krishna, one of the Indian gods, was a carpenter, born to a virgin, baptized in a river, rose from the dead, and then ascended into heaven. There are 12 gods that were born on 12/25 that all predated Jesus' birth. He then goes on to compare religion to Star Wars and saying that, you know, in a couple thousand years from now, we'll probably be worshiping Star Wars. And I think he has a point. He does go on about that Star Wars is like a Christ story, but he talks about Jar Jar Binks. But even as a kid, I realized that Star Wars was really a Christ story. Now he particularly talks about the remake of Star Wars or the prequel, and that it's prophesized that a savior would come. Anakin was conceived without a father and was born through the work of the midichlorians, which suggested a direct intervention by the Force. Otherwise, Anakin was born to a virgin mother. This claim sets Anakin apart, framing his destiny as the chosen one, prophesied to bring balance to the Force. He eventually dies and is resurrected, quote unquote, as Vader. And in a roundabout way, he does become the savior because without Anakin, there would be no Luke or Leia, and Anakin does save Luke by defeating the Emperor, which ultimately causes the collapse of the Empire and a new age of enlightenment begins. But even in the first film, or actually episode 1, which was relabeled New Hope, Luke's background is intentionally vague. We begin the story of him being an ordinary farm boy or carpenter. He's initiated by the Force, performs miracles. For example, being able to get a shot in the Death Star vent without a targeting computer that no one else seems to be able to do. And by the end of the film, he learns that he comes from royal lineage. Reed goes on and he asks if they want help choosing doors, and they reply yes. He helps by writing believe on one door and disbelief on the other, and asks them to choose based upon their faith. Reed writes belief on the left door and disbelief on the right door. He goes on to explain that belief is if God is real and watches us as we masturbate and has such a fragile ego that he only helps us when we beg him and pray to him, and he hates gays because for being what he made them to be, well, that's terrifying. Disbelief he explains as if there is no God and we are just horny microscopic ants with no divine purpose and no hope to achieve eternal life floating around on a rock through space, well, that's terrifying too. Either the church is true or it's a fraud. He quotes the President Gordon of the Mormon Church. He then tells them to choose which door to go through based on their faith. He then continues that all 10,000 variable religions today are artificial as the symbolic church you are standing in. This is false. There is nothing holy here. Your religious texts are mere ornaments, as hollow and capitalistic as these ridiculous games. Reed writes belief on the left door and disbelief on the right door. So Barnes responds back to him, and she argues that the reason why Judaism is less popular is due to the Holocaust and religious persecution. She then argues that he points out that the similarities to the other deities to Jesus, but fails to mention the blaring differences, and she's quick to point out that Horus has a bird's head. She asks what it is that he is looking for and argues that his logic is missing something. Paxton suggests that it's best to listen to Mr. Reed since he has posed such a logical argument against the existence of God, and tells Barnes they should leave through the disbelief door. But Sister Barnes chooses the belief door, arguing that if he's going to kill them, it makes no difference in what door they choose, so she might as well be honest about her faith in God. Paxton follows her. When they open the door, they discover a dark pair of stairs that lead down into the darkness. They begin heading down the stairs that I believe is symbolism for the descent into the abyss or into hell. Reed shuts the door, locking them in as they head down these stairs. Reed then heads back to a model of the home he has made and moves wooden figures of Paxton and Barnes around like they are pawns on a chessboard. In fact, we later learn that the house is set up like a chessboard. To me, this is reminiscent of the H. Holmes Murder Castle, as they call it. It's a three-story mixed-use building that was built by it's Dr. Holmes that had apartments. Actually, first floor was retail space, apartments on the second floor, and the third floor was a hotel. It's said that he had built it specifically with hidden rooms and traps to torture and kill people. And here's another interesting thing to ponder. When you see the model of the home, you realize both doors to the basement really lead to the same place. Is this an analogy to the idea that it doesn't really matter what we believe, that we all end up in the same place anyway? I think it does. At the bottom, they find the stairs lead to a cellar, but quickly they discover there is no obvious exit. And once locked down in the cellar, Reed seems to do a 180 and becomes a believer all of a sudden. I think, again, this is another example of gaslighting. Soon after, the opposite door opens in the cellar, and a very creepy robed thing, for lack of a better term, comes out with a pie. Reed tells them that this thing is a prophet and he needs them to witness a miracle. He tells them that the pie is poisoned with wolfbane and belladonna, and the prophet will be dead soon after eating the pie. By the grace of God, she will be resurrected. Reed further states, I believe this is a miracle, is proof that all other religions are monstrously false and merely ancient echoes of something true. The prophet then eats the pie and falls dead immediately after. Reed asks them to verify her pulse and her breath to verify that she's dead. They do so, but immediately following, there is a knock at Reed's front door. Reed leaves to go answer the door, and he has to manipulate a hidden mechanical timer to open the door. Obviously, this was the noise the girls first heard when he opened the door at the very beginning. Reed opens the door to find it is one of the church elders looking for the girls. While he is distracted, the girls run back up the stairs and attempt to break out. They pull a box of matches that fell on the carpet earlier under the door. The brand is called Red and White. Is there significance here? Again, I think so. Reed quickly convinces the elders that he has never seen them and returns. The girls then run back down into the cellar with the matches. Paxton realizes that the body has moved. Sister Barnes states that she is imagining things and tries to light a fire with the matches. At this point that we discover the prophet is no longer sitting in the chair. In a classic jump scare, the prophet is standing right behind Paxton and claims to be resurrected. Reed then shows up, thanks the prophet for her time, and sends her scurrying away down another hidden corridor. Reed claims one of them has been lying since the beginning, and he has a secret, and he knows this because the flame of the match reacts to one of them. This is a second reference to the flame, the first being when Reed touches a flame earlier in the film of a candle, stating that he's scared after his revelation that religion is fake. He then asks for an eyewitness account of the resurrection. Barn argues that there are prisoners, so what is the point of staging a contrived experiment? Paxton replies that she has saw it, that the prophet described what was on the other side. She said there was a conductor, an angel, a feeling of disassociation, and a feeling of something wasn't real. Reed then states, now you know. Paxton responds confused, and Reed replies that he can show them God, but they just have to die. But it can be painless, it can be temporarily, and they can be brought back just like the prophet has. It doesn't have to be frightening. What is frightening is knowing that you are frightened. Where do we come from? Where are we going? What is our purpose? It's terrifying. The answer to those questions is why religions exist. I can answer those questions for you. I can give you a comfort that no religion in the world is capable of giving you. Barn responds to him that he knows he was going to convinced convince them how to kill themselves. She states she doesn't know he's playing checkers or chess. Reed replies, Monopoly. She replies that she didn't show them a miracle, that it was a near-death experience. Barn then goes on to talk about Taco Bell and that she died of E. coli poisoning. She was clinically dead while the doctors operated on her kidneys, and she saw the same thing that the prophet saw: a blinding white light, clouds but not heaven, a sense of wanting to return, and her sense of reality not being real. She argues that that wasn't a prophecy, that was a near-death experience. She goes on that when your brain doesn't get enough oxygen or your heart stops pumping, your mind creates incredible things. She accuses him of keeping this woman at the edge of death for meaningless hallucinations while he tries to determine what the one true religion is. Reed goes on to say, when you remember something, you're really only remembering the last time you remembered that experience. You're not actually recalling the death. It's the memory of the memory of the memory. He says she is remembering a false correlation with the experience that she just witnessed, and that what she is seeing is real and it's happening right now. At the end of their argument, Reed cuts Barnes' throat with a box knife. Barnes falls and begins to die. And at this point, you see the transformation in Paxton, and Paxton decides to begin challenging Reed. When Barnes does not resurrect as Reed said she would, he cuts open her arm and pulls out an implanted birth control that he tells Paxton is a chip, and that the reason she did not resurrect is that she is a program or a non-player character in a simulation. He states he knew this by the way that the flame reacted to her. The butterfly dream he brings up, and he says that the butterfly dream is a philosopher who questioned, am I a man dreaming of a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a man? Reed tries to convince Paxton that she's now in a simulation, and he describes the simulation hypothesis. And he tells her that when she kills herself, she'll simply just wake up in the quote-unquote real world. She responds that she now believes that something did not go as he expected, and he is now improvising. She tells him she no longer believes that she witnessed a miracle, but instead a magic trick. Paxton tells him that he switched the bodies following the elders' arrival, and while they were distracted trying to get the matches, she pointed out to him that she had noticed that the body had moved. She continues that another woman switched places with the dead woman. Reed gave her a script to read off describing the afterlife, but she went off script, and the last thing that she said was, "It's not real," and she said so as a clue to them that this was all set up. He argues that this couldn't have occurred because there's no other way out of the basement. Paxton notices that the dripping water from the ceiling is not puddling up and is draining somewhere, so she pulls back the table to reveal that there's a trapdoor in the floor. He replies that if this is true, there must be a dead body down there. She replies that if she has to go down there, she will to find out. Reed asks why, and she responds, because I want to know the truth, and the only way out is through. Reed responds, Robert Frost, and Paxton responds, no, Swamp Thing. Yet another example of an iteration. He tells her, do not go down there unless she is prepared to discover the quote-unquote one true religion. She does go down there, and the dead body of the first prophet is just at the bottom of the stairs. She now goes through multiple rooms with increasing occult symbolism and iconography, and then eventually, at the very end, we see paintings of Satan. Again, I think this is the descent into hell. Her bicycle lock holds the last door closed. She gets it open, and in the last chamber holds multiple women in cages, a misting device to keep it wet and cold down there. Reed shows up on the other side of the room, which he came down from a spiral staircase. He asks Paxton if she has figured it out yet. She replies that it all makes sense. He then asks, "What is the one true religion?" She replies, "When we first arrived, you left us alone in your living room. We thought you were talking to your wife, but he was doing something else." She continues that he took the key from Sister Barnes' bike lock and went out and removed their bikes to hide them. She noticed that his hair was wet when they came back in with the drinks. But there was something else on his mind because he returned the bike key to the wrong coat pocket. Initially, she thought this was a mistake he had made, but now she realized that it wasn't, because he gave the bike lock to one of the prophets and instructed them to lock the final cellar door with it. Reed asks, "Then why did I do this?" And Paxton replies that it's because Reed wanted her to know the only reason she is standing there right now is because it's exactly where he wants her to be. "I'm here because I chose to be. I'm here because you made me choose to be. Because you want me to believe that the one true religion is control." He tells her that she is exactly right. Religion is just a control system. Paxton tells the caged women that she will help them. Reed replies that the funny thing is they don't want her help, that they are exactly where they chose to be. Paxton replies that he killed that woman. Reed replies that he disagrees and that she chose to eat the poison pie because of her profound faith. And he goes on to say that it's called drinking the Kool-Aid. The reason he keeps it so cold is that it's easier to control someone who has lost everything, or the same reason her church gives out Bibles after hurricanes. He then cuts off one of the fingers of the caged woman because she is the one that went off script and warned the sister that this was not real. Reed then goes on to question, say that the big question is why do you all let me? You are here because the ideas of others have influenced every decision you have made since the day you were born, and I have been able to predict every decision you have made because of it. You have allowed them to make every decision of your life. They decide who you worship, where you worship, what you worship. They even dictate the garments you wear under your clothes, your magic underwear. At this point, Paxton stabs Reed in the throat with an envelope opener and runs up the staircase. This leads to a study where above the fireplace is a painting of the Inferno, which has the 7 layers of hell. This leads to a secret door to the stairwell of the cellar. Reed has found his way back up into the first cellar and ambushes Paxton, stabbing her in the abdomen with the box cutter. Here's a good question. Is this symbolism due to the box cutters were used during the 9/11 attacks, which also had a religious reasoning for those attacks? As they both lay there dying, Reed asks Paxton to pray for us. Paxton responds the prayer does not work. The Great Prayer Experiment, that they did a study with 2 groups, and one group they prayed for and the other that they didn't. The result was that prayer did not work. But she finds it beautiful that we still pray for each other, even though we all probably know that it doesn't work. It's just nice to think of someone other than yourself, even if it's not you. She then begins to pray for Reed. As he crawls across the floor to her, he stops for a moment and appears to be crying while bringing the box cutter up to her throat. At the very last second, something hit Reed and he falls to the side. It was Sister Barnes who's become conscious long enough to use a board that was laying there with nails sticking out of it to kill Reed. Interesting to note, there's 3 nails in this board. Is this a reference to Jesus being nailed on the cross? Is this a reference to the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit? Regardless, Barnes takes her final breath. Paxton says her goodbyes to her, and she dies. Paxton then runs back upstairs, gets into the study again, and she rips apart the model of his house and finds a vent that leads outside the home. She climbs through this vent, takes her cell phone, and finds her way out into a snow-covered clearing while the sun is rising. She sends a text message and then notices a butterfly sitting on her hand. But when we cut to a different angle of the same scene, the butterfly is gone. She then looks up at the sky, and we cut to the credits. The first song of the credits is a version of Knocking on Heaven's Door, but it's sung to the music of Fade Into You by Maisie Starr. Yet another example of yet another iteration. So let's get into a deep dive analysis, starting with some of the trivia. Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East were both raised Mormon, so they were able to give a unique insight and perspective during filming. Interesting to note, they're no longer Mormon. Looks like the magic underwear didn't work out. This is the second A24 film using miniatures. The first is another horror film titled Heretic. The Air That I Breathe was originally written by Albert Hammond, not the Hollies, as Mr. Reed believes. This may be an intentional Easter egg in the film because, interestingly to note, I could also not reference that Voltaire was the first to be quoted as saying, "With great power comes great responsibility." I suspect the point here is that although Reed thinks that he knows it all, he's operating on some erroneous data. The historic Jewish tradition of the soul of a deceased person is said to linger around their body for at least 3 days after death before it leaves for the afterlife. Only after this point is the person considered fully and completely dead in all ways. The corpse also would have begun rotting by the 3rd day, making it unmistakable that the person was dead in a time where medical technologies may have made that question difficult to answer. The significance of Lazarus and Jesus being resurrected only after 3 days is that it shows miraculous powers over full death in an unequivocal way, where bringing them back earlier might have caused doubt that it was a medical mistake. The above is taught in the Church of Latter-day Saint seminaries, so the missionaries would have been aware of this from the extensive religious training. Therefore, the views of Mr. Reed's resurrection as a true miracle over death, because it happened only a few minutes ago, would have been in question by the two sisters. Earlier in the movie, Mr. Reed asked Barnes and Paxton how they feel about polygamy. Later in the basement, he introduced them to his wives carrying the promised blueberry pie. Ultimately, Paxton discovers cages full of similar women, revealing the real reason Reed initially questioned about polygamy. Before Sister Paxton stabs Mr. Reed, he mentions her magic underwear. The magic underwear was the signal Sister Barnes told Sister Paxton to wait for to stab Mr. Reed earlier in the film. So now let's get into the theology, philosophy, and the symbolism of the film. The film has pissed quite a few people off. One article I read called it dumb screed. Tisk tisk. I just think this is poor form. Just because you don't like the content of the film doesn't mean that it's dumb as Creed. In fact, I find this film very thought-provoking, but let's get back to the specific symbolism of the film. We already discussed the number 303 sticker. The significance being here is it's the angel number 303, which suggests positive growth and transformation. Let's talk more about the cross with the circle and the 4 dots. I've seen this in some of the Knights Templar iconography, and most references that I can find, it is called the Sun Cross. It is very ancient and it predates any of the Christian religion or the Abrahamic religions. Its meaning can vary depending on the context. The ancient version is that it is solar symbolism, such as the Celts or Native Americans. The cross with the dots represent the sun or solar energy. The dots could symbolize the 4 seasons, the 4 directions, or the cycles of the year. And alchemaic and hermetic traditions, it's the union of opposites, horizontal and vertical axes, representing earth and heaven, with the dots highlighting points of energy, transformation, or balance. In Christian religions, it might represent Christ present in all directions, and the dots may symbolize the wounds of Christ in certain theological or artistic representations, also known as stigmata. Native American symbolism, they use it on their medicine wheel. It is a similar design as represents balance, harmony, and interconnectedness of life. And then there's some astrological symbolism that could represent the earth, physicality, material existence, and the union of space and time. And modern interpretations use it as occult symbols to symbolize balance, stability, and the 4 quadrants of life: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual states. The magic underwear. It's true that Mormons have a traditional undergarment that is used to remind them of the covenant and their commitment. In some references, it is also said to offer protection. And in Sister Paxton's case, it looks like it worked. The water, we see water in many forms in this film, as the rainstorm, the snowstorm, leaking through Reed's church room ceiling, leaking through the cellar ceiling. And this is most typically a symbolism of baptism and purification. We also see water misters in the final cellar where the women are caged. Misters like you would see in a greenhouse. Reed is also using a gardener's watering can to fill the woman's bowls. Lastly, we see Reed using pruning shears to trim their nails. I suspect that this is symbolism that he is tending and growing his followers, his disciples, just like Christ did. The symbolism of blueberries. In ancient cultures, blueberries have held a specific place in religious and spiritual practices. They often used in rituals to invoke blessing, protection, and good fortune. The deep blue color of the berries symbolized the sky or the divine realm, and their sweet taste was associated with abundance and prosperity. Paxton states, "When I die, I want to come back as a butterfly and follow around the people I love and land right on their hand of the people that she loves." At the very end, she has a butterfly land on her hand. Is this Sister Barnes? Is this just her mind? We know that through other sources that the symbolizing of the butterfly here is freedom. We could see that in the first scene where we see the butterfly trying to get out of the window. Paxton is the butterfly now. She has become free. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I believe it is Sister Barnes coming back to let Paxton know it's all okay. Reed states that he thinks it is strange that Barnes' dad has not tried to contact her from the other side. I believe he's hinting here that there is no other side, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is nothing, there is no religion. Reed asks about polygamy, stating this is um, the modern revelation, to erase it, to banish it. Questions about Joseph Smith. And again, this is most likely because of all the women that he has down in the basement, locked in cages. With great power comes great responsibility. Paxton says Spider-Man. Reed responds that it's Voltaire. This is not only another example of iteration, but they, again, I could find no reference that Voltaire actually said this. It looks like it was much older. And again, I think this is to symbolize that Reed is not functioning on all the facts. It's also noted in an interview with the filmmakers that they point out that there could have been multiple outcomes from the evening. So, for example, contrary to contradictory evidence that Reed sets up, we find there is a woman that he replies is his wife, and a blueberry pie. So, what would have happened if the girls continued to believe that there was a wife and insisted on meeting her, regardless of the evidence to the contrary? I feel that this is yet another example of Reed's attempt of misdirection and gaslighting. And if they insisted on meeting her, maybe he would have let them go. I'm not sure. But the again, interviews with the filmmakers indicate that there may have been multiple outcomes of this evening. Side notes on the landlord game. Elizabeth Maggie, in 1902-1903, she designed the game. The game was created to be a practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing with all its usual outcomes and consequences. She based the game on the economic principles of Georgism, a system proposed by Henry George with the objection of demonstrating how rents and rich property owners and impoverished tenants. She knew that some people would find it hard to understand why that's happened and what might be done about it. So she created the game. Maggie hoped that when played by children, the game would provoke their natural curiosity and suspicion of unfairness, and that they might carry awareness into adulthood. Interestingly enough, this might be an iteration itself. It's noted that the landlord game has some similarities to the basic rules of a board game called Zone Al, played by the Kiowa Indians of North America. There are hints that suggest that Elizabeth Maggie might have known some Zone Al and incorporated some of the ideas into the game. So again, another iteration of an iteration, and proof that Reed does not know everything that he's talking about. Let's talk more about the songs in the film. I'm sorry, I think I skipped it, but earlier on in the film, during the whole fake church scene, during his whole philosophical discussion, Reed goes on about how the song All I Want Is the Air That I Breathe was written and performed by the Hollies, and then this was stolen by Radiohead and turned into Creep, and then that was stolen by Lana Del Rey, and she created this song, known as Get Free. But the interesting here is that through my investigation, the Hollies were not the ones to first write or perform The Air That I Breathe. The original was written by Albert Hammond. So yet again, another iteration of an iteration of an iteration. But if you look at Lana Del Rey's lyrics, this goes even deeper. And this isn't mentioned in the film at all, But when I looked up the lyrics, I found this very, very interesting. The lyrics go, "Finally, I'm crossing the threshold from the ordinary world to the revel of my heart. Undoubtedly, that will be certain take the dead out of the sea and the darkness from the arts. This is my commitment, my modern manifesto. I'm doing it for all of us who never got the chance. For shut up, and all my birds of paradise, shut up, who never got to fly at night, shut up, because they were caught up in the dance. Sometimes it feels like I've got a war in my mind. I want to get off, but I keep riding the ride. I never really noticed that I had to decide to play someone's game or live my own life. And now I do. I want to move out of the black, into the blue, into the blue. Finally, gone is the burden of Crowley way of being that comes from energies combined, like my part was I, was not discerned, and you, as we found out, were not in your right mind. There's no more chasing rainbows and hoping for an end to them. Their arches are illusions, solid at first glance, but then you touch them. Touch. There's nothing to hold on to. Hold. The colors used to lure you in. Shut up, and put you in a trance. Ah. How deep it is. How very deep all of this is. Particularly, basically, I think that the lyrics are almost scene by scene the plot of this film. I could spend an hour analyzing and comparing the lyrics to this film. But before we move on, I do want to focus on one aspect of these lyrics. Note the lyric, "Gone is the burden of the Crowley way." This is a reference to Aleister Crowley. He had lived a life of drug use and debauchery. He was known as the wickedest man in the world. He was a huge occultist who founded the Temple of Thelma and despised Christianity, actively speaking out against it. Crowley's lifestyle was obviously shocking in the area in which he lived. Beside his interest in the cult, he was sexually promiscuous with both genders at a time when homosexuality was illegal in Great Britain. He frequented prostitutes and was vocally defiant against Christianity and the Victorian and post-Victorian prudishness towards sexual subjects, and was a drug addict. While Crowley detested Christianity, he considered himself an immensely religious and spiritual person. His writing records indicate an experiencing deity, and Thelmites consider him to be a prophet. In 1904, he encountered a being known as Aiwaz, described as a minister to Horus, the central deity in Thelma, and as a holy guardian angel. Aiwaz dictated the Book of Law, which Crowley wrote down and published, becoming the central thematic text. Wow, this is a reflection of the Book of Mormon. This is a reflection of Reed, and it is all hidden within this iteration that is mentioned in the film, but you don't know about it until you actually listen to the song or read these lyrics. I also feel the film is very timely. Recently, just in the year 2024, there's been a book published by Joseph Atwill titled Caesar's Messiah, the Roman Conspiracy to Invent Jesus. In this book, Atwill claims that he has found written historical documentation that the Roman government created Jesus as propaganda to control the population. In addition, it suggested that as Rome realized it was losing political power, it morphed itself into a religious movement to maintain power. In short, there's no coincidence the Vatican City is in Rome. And unfortunately, everything Reed says about Jesus predecessors is true from the sources I can find. Yes, unfortunately, at least 12 different gods have their birthdays on December 25th. It must be a very lucky day to be born. Most likely, this is because of ancient religions found the winter solstice to be sacred. It just so happens that the winter solstice falls around December 25. So you see, kids, each new iteration of religion tends to steal the older holiday and adopt it for their own. This tends to be the easiest way to convert others to your new religion. Case in point, Christmas is the Christian holiday, Yule is the pagan holiday. All Saints' Day is the Christian holiday, whereas Halloween, or I think it's pronounced Samhain, is the pagan holiday. And let's not forget Easter and Osara. In fact, we still use bunnies and Easter, the pagan symbolism, even in the Christian holiday, for representation or symbolism. Now, this is not to mention how Egyptian, Greek, and Roman gods were often the same gods under different names. And one of the most modern examples of this is that voodoo, the voodoo religion, has adopted the Christian saints. So it's all very interesting. But I think really what it all boils down to is believe versus disbelief. Both doors really go to the same place in this film. I think this is an analogy that it doesn't really matter what we believe, that we're all going to end up in the same place. And I think this is the key takeaway. Reed's wrong. Control is not the one true religion. This is what man has done to religion. It is the adulterated and twisted version that man uses for its own purposes. Personally, I don't think what you believe or worship matters much. We'll all end up in the same place. I think what matters is having a personal relationship with God. Consider this. Life was created as the opposing force in the universe to entropy. Life should not exist if you really think about it. Life is the only thing that creates order out of nothingness. It creates order out of chaos. Life builds and maintains. Entropy tears down and decays. Take, for example, an abandoned building. Without human intervention, within a few weeks, without having, heat, water, electricity, that building is going to start to decay and crumble. If you want a simple answer to the meaning of life and why we're here, this is it. Life, was created to build and to reproduce, so generation after generation we can keep building. And one of the biggest misdirections that organized religion has sold us is that we need them. We need them to get to God. And this is a total lie. Truly, God is in each of us, and I think it's wonderful that if you want to go to a temple or a church or belong to a certain religion, I certainly respect that and I support that. And please donate to their cause. But I also urge you on what Reed has said and Joseph Atwill has said. No matter what they've said, don't give up on your faith, because faith does matter. No matter what you believe, it's true. If you look at the manifestation hypothesis, it suggests that everything that we believe is true. It's true. Paxton brings up the great prayer experiment. Part of this might have just been to screw with Reed, to gaslight him as he has gaslit her. I looked up that study, and it is true that they did not see any significance between the groups. However, there was only about 1,900 subjects involved. That's a very small number of people for a study. I would argue that prayer does work. For instance, a meta-analysis published in the Annals of Internal Medicine in 2000 looked at the results of prayer in 2,774 patients. This was 23 different studies and found that 13 studies showed statistically significant positive results. 9 studies showed no effect, and 1 study showed a negative result. Now, you might say this is the placebo effect, but take a look at any of these pharmaceutical studies. Many of these drugs show only a 2 to 3% statistical significance from placebo. I'm not suggesting that these drugs don't work. I'm not suggesting the prayer doesn't work, but what I'm suggesting is the belief is very strong. And what we think is who we are. What is above, so is below. So here's some closing thoughts. Some thoughts on Reed. Something happened to Reed. I'd like to see a prequel. He's not the physical, mindless sociopath you typically see in these films. I suspect at one time he did have a loving wife. I suspect something happened. Maybe they were both devoted Christians and then she got sick and died. I don't know. Faith didn't heal her. God did not save her. Not sure what happened, but something happened to cause Reed to lose or question his faith. Although Reed makes multiple statements that he has found the one true religion, I don't think he really believes it. This is evident when he asks Paxton to pray for him. He wants there to be something more. And this is what all these crazy experiments and locking women in cages is about. He wants proof that God and the afterlife is real, that they do exist. But he's too afraid to kill himself to find out for himself. So he uses all these others to try to find his proof. But the real story here is about Paxton. The whole plot boils down to the hero's journey for Paxton. Her journey from darkness to enlightenment. For the majority of the film, up until Barnes' death, Paxton is just a passenger. She goes along with everything. She, even at the very beginning of the film, she says she only became a Mormon because of its porn video. She's wanting to belong and latches on to some belief that she hasn't fully bought into just to be part of something bigger. But at the end, she discovered that she has the power. She has been freed. The symbolism of the butterfly, among the other symbolisms behind the butterfly through the film. She is free now from the ideologies and the faiths of others and has discovered that everyone has their own path. And it's good to have faith, but ultimately, your faith is in your own hands. Well, I could go on and on. There's just so many layers here. Not only is what the filmmakers have intended, but I suspect there's a lot of unintentional symbolism that's been generated through this masterpiece. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I got to run for today. So please click like and subscribe, and share with your friends. Comment below your thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are and if there's something I can help you out with. And join me next week. Oh, and don't forget, pleasant nightmares.